This is just a very simple exercise to learn how to use the deep hip. In a lot of the internal arts, it's called the qua. It really doesn't matter how you label it, so long as you can feel in there and use it practically. What we're going to do is a simple drill, which involves just lifting one knee at a time, but we're going to do it in a very particular way. Normally when we lift a knee, something rotates, I have the other leg push into the ground, and because that leg pushes into the ground, I can lift the other leg easily. It's a nice way of doing things. It distributes a lot of force around the body and makes it very easy to do that. We're specifically now going to do the opposite to that, just to force the effort into a particular region of the body, mainly through the qua, so we can strengthen it. Once it's strengthened, as we go back to our normal movement patterns, we'll find that it becomes more involved in those patterns, and therefore we have a bigger balance across the system. So first of all, set yourself up with your normal alignment points while seated. So my neck is open, my shoulders are spread and released, my chest is sunk, my hips are open, my feet are under my knees. Then I want to, as if there was a string attached to the end of my knee, I want to try and lift the knee out of the ground, but I specifically don't want to push this leg into the ground. So I'm lifting this knee, but I don't want this one to push into the ground at all. This leg stays entirely released, and I just try and lift the other one. In the start, you may be inclined to lean back a bit just to get the motion to happen. That's fine. Over time, you want to see if you can get the same motion without leaning back, lifting the knee out of the ground. You can go left side, left side, and so on. My left at the moment, a little bit less functional than my right. And as I lift it up, I can even hold it statically. I can release my weight through my qua into the sit bones. I want to release the lower leg so it's just kind of dangling. And I want to release the weight from the upper leg as if the upper leg weight poured down through the qua into the sit bone. Both the sit bones should maintain the same level of pressure. I shouldn't feel the pressure fall onto one side or the other. It should be the same as I lift up. And the better I get at this, the more difficult it gets. The more I deeply release everything, the more the effort falls into this one region which is not yet released, and it makes that region work really strongly, in this case, the deep hip. And I just start to play with how can I move my leg around from down in the qua without at all pushing the other leg into the ground. I keep the other leg completely released, and I do my best to keep the upper body also released. As I put the foot back down into the ground, let all the effort release from that leg into the ground, and then I try the other side. Remember, I want to lift the knee, and it feels a little bit like as I lift the knee, I release, and all the weight falls down the quad, down the leg into the qua. At the same time, all the effort draining down the leg through the foot into the ground, making the foot very heavy. And the more I release, the heavier it gets, so it gets more difficult to lift. So I'm lifting from the qua, allowing the knee to rise without pushing the other leg into the ground. If I notice I'm pushing that other leg and there's this kind of activity there, just release it and you'll feel the effort get stronger here. And if I find I'm kind of doing any kind of oblique or abdominal work to help lift it, just release it. The weight will go into the sit bone, and the effort here will again amplify. And I want to keep this idea of releasing all the unnecessary stuff until the effort has to come from the deep qua. And then I experiment with how to use that qua very freely, as long as I keep this idea of release here, you see my legs kind of dangling. I want to notice any hamstring or calf curling going on and release that too. Same with the other leg. I want to notice any kind of weird pulling through the torso and release that too, so my torso just straightens up. And get used to lifting the knee from the quad, from the deep hip. Of course, in the start, it's better to go way slowly so you can like release, 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 release while you're doing it. I'm releasing this leg and all of this leg as I lift this knee, as if it's getting lifted out of the ground by an external force. And then I stay there and I release some more through the torso. I release some more through the other leg. And it can feel a bit like the femur's kind of being falling back or sucking down into the hip to get this done. At the start, you may not even be able to lift the leg off the ground. That's okay. Keep playing with it until you find this effect. Even if you lift the leg a little bit and then play with the release from the lifted leg, that can work as well. And of course, it will evolve as you release down through different tension patterns that you have. As it goes deeper, it can sometimes feel like it reverts, but it's actually just moving through deeper blockages. And depending on which layer of blockages on, your system tends to distort itself in certain ways. It's not a problem at all. Just keep the basic idea, trying to lift by releasing everything through the leg, everything through the upper body. You're lifting through release. It works in here very strongly. You'll find out pretty quickly what the quad is about. It also makes you really, really warm. It can be nice to do in winter when you're not feeling the circulation so clearly. And of course, there are loads and loads of ways of evolving this exercise. I can, for example, after getting here, work out how I can extend my leg through release. Then it becomes very, very tricky. It's not at all about a gymnastics thing, just like reaming it forward. I just open the leg as much as I can. I keep releasing into the quad. Every time I release, you see I lose a little bit of my height. So then I need to open, 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 open again. I release as I open, I release as I open. It all gets very shaky, but it goes into newer and deeper parts of my body. So I can explore straightening the leg, opening the leg, getting higher, getting wider and stuff like this. The nice thing about doing this seated is it gives you a reference point for your sit bones to make sure your hips aren't doing something funky and that you're forced to use the quad. Once you're familiar with this seated, you want to replicate the exercise but standing, which means I need to stand on one leg, release the hips and do the exact same thing. And again, here I'm trying to work out how to lift the knee without pushing the other leg into the ground, which will make this kind of action happen. I release down through that leg. I release down through the quad, and as I lift the knee, I release this way into the quad and also down through the lower leg. And I want to get to the point where I can lift the leg as high as possible, releasing down through the quad. Again, the better you get at it, the more difficult it gets. And then slowly work out how to explore with the leg through using the quad from a state of release. What I don't want to happen here is this kind of thing. I can do this, no problem. It's not the same as releasing down and coming up this way. So avoid any kind of funky movement of the torso, of the hips. And to help train this, again, just keep going back to seated because that will give you the very clear idea if you're doing funny things with the hips to get the knee up. So play with that. As it brings this area to life, it can be very useful to then do either the seated practice where you listen to the structure or a standing version where I also stop and listen into that region and just let the new things I discovered integrate with the rest of my existing bodily knowledge.